The wind howled like a hungry wolf, biting at Dusty's weathered face. He squinted, the setting sun painting the endless plains in shades of orange and purple. Dusty was a ghost in this land, a silent rider on a dusty trail. He hadn't spoken a word in years. Some said he'd lost his tongue to a bandit's blade. Others whispered it was heartbreak that stole his voice. Whatever the truth, silence was now his constant companion. His horse, a sturdy Mustang named Bess, plodded onward, her hooves kicking up small clouds of dust. They had been traveling for weeks, searching for. Dusty wasn't even sure what he was searching for anymore. Maybe just a place to rest, a moment of peace in a world that offered little of either. The land was harsh, unforgiving. Cactuses stood like silent sentinels, their thorny arms reaching towards the sky. The sun beat down mercilessly during the day, and the nights were cold and unforgiving. Food was scarce, and water even more so. Dusty relied on his skills as a tracker and hunter to survive, skills he had honed over years of wandering. He wore simple clothes, a worn leather vest, a faded blue shirt, and sturdy denim pants. A wide-brimmed hat shielded his eyes from the sun, and a red bandana covered the lower half of his face, protecting him from the dust. A trusty Colt revolver hung low on his hip, a constant reminder of the dangers that lurked in the Wild West. Dusty wasn't a bad man, not really. He just carried a heavy burden, a sadness that clung to him like the dust on his boots. He helped those in need when he could, offering a silent hand or a share of his meager supplies. But he always kept his distance, afraid to let anyone get too close. The pain of the past was a wound that never fully healed, a constant ache in his heart. He just wanted to keep going. He was a shadow, a phantom, traveling alone. He was just hoping to find something to make him feel alive. Maybe he was looking for a reason. Maybe he was looking for a friend. Dusty rode for what felt like forever, the sun slowly dipping below the horizon. Just when he thought he would have to make camp in the open desert, a flicker of something caught his eye in the distance. He urged Bess forward, his curiosity piqued. As they drew closer, the flicker resolved into the outline of buildings, a town. But this wasn't like any town Dusty had seen before. It was deserted, eerily silent. The buildings were dilapidated, their windows boarded up, paint peeling like sunburnt skin. The wooden sidewalks were cracked and overgrown with weeds. It looked as if everyone had simply vanished one day, leaving everything behind. A true ghost town. Dusty dismounted Bess at the edge of town, his hand instinctively resting on the handle of his revolver. He scanned the surroundings, his senses on high alert. There was an unsettling feeling in the air, a sense of abandonment and despair that sent a shiver down his spine. Even Bess seemed uneasy, her ears twitching nervously. He led Bess slowly down the main street, the only sound the creaking of the wind whistling through broken windows and the soft thud of Bess's hooves on the dusty ground. A rusted sign hung crookedly over what was once the saloon, barely legible. "The Golden Nugget," it read, a testament to dreams of riches that had long since faded. Dusty paused in front of the general store, its door hanging open like a gaping mouth. He peered inside, but it was too dark to see anything. Cobwebs draped across the shelves, and the air smelled of decay. He moved on, drawn by an unseen force, further into the heart of the silent town. He passed a church with a crumbling steeple, a schoolhouse with broken windows, and several small houses, all bearing the marks of time and neglect. What happened here? Why had everyone left? He felt like an intruder, a trespasser in a place that held forgotten memories. It was a graveyard of dreams, a monument to lost hope. But something held him there, something beyond curiosity, something that tugged at his soul. He had to know more. He had to understand the secrets hidden within these decaying walls. This town was waiting for someone. The air grew heavy, the silence almost suffocating. Dusty continued his slow walk down the main street, his eyes scanning every building, every shadow. He reached what appeared to be the town's old bank. The heavy wooden door was off its hinges, revealing a dark and gaping entrance. He hesitated for a moment, then cautiously stepped inside. The interior was even more dilapidated than the exterior. Dust lay thick on every surface, and the air smelled of mildew and decay. The cellar windows were shattered, and the vault door stood ajar, revealing nothing but darkness. As he turned to leave, a faint sound reached his ears. At first, he thought it was just the wind playing tricks on him. But then he heard it again, a soft, muffled sob. It seemed to be coming from somewhere beneath him. Dusty froze, his senses on high alert. He listened intently, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. He moved towards the back of the bank, his footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust. He noticed a section of the floor that looked slightly different from the rest. It was a trapdoor, almost perfectly concealed beneath a layer of dirt and debris. He knelt down and brushed away the dirt, revealing a rusty metal ring. Dusty grabbed the ring and pulled. The trapdoor creaked open, revealing a dark and narrow staircase leading down into the earth. The muffled sobs were louder now, clearer. There was no doubt about it. Someone was down there. His heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew he couldn't just leave whoever was down there to suffer. He took a deep breath, drew his revolver, and started down the creaking stairs, deeper into the darkness, ready to face whatever horrors awaited him in the cellar below. The musty air grew thick and cold as he descended, carrying the faint scent of despair and something else, something vaguely familiar. This town may be silent, but the cellar was speaking volumes. He just needed to listen, and he would. The stairs were steep and treacherous, slick with moisture and crumbling with age. Dusty descended slowly, carefully, his revolver held ready in his right hand. The darkness was almost complete, broken only by slivers of light filtering through cracks in the trapdoor above. The air grew colder, and the scent of despair intensified, mingling with the damp earth. Finally, his boots touched solid ground. He was in a small, cramped cellar. The walls were made of rough-hewn stone, and the ceiling was low, forcing him to stoop. The only source of light was the faint glow from above, barely illuminating the space. In the far corner of the cellar, huddled against the wall, he saw her, a young woman, her clothes torn and dirty, her face pale and gaunt. She was chained to the wall, her wrists raw and bleeding. Her eyes, wide and filled with terror, darted towards him as he approached. "Please, don't hurt me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I haven't done anything." Dusty lowered his revolver, his heart aching at the sight of her suffering. He couldn't speak, but he offered her a reassuring nod, trying to convey his intentions through his eyes. He knelt down beside her, examining the chains that bound her. They were thick and heavy, secured with a rusty padlock. He pulled out his knife and began to work on the lock, his hands moving quickly and efficiently. He had picked locks before, in his younger days, and the skill came back to him easily. After a few tense moments, the lock clicked open. He freed her from the chains, gently supporting her as she stumbled to her feet. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "Thank you so much." Dusty simply nodded, offering her a small, sad smile. He knew he had to get her out of this place, to safety. But first, he had to know who she was, and how she ended up locked in this dark and forgotten cellar. He pointed to himself, then gestured towards her, a silent question hanging in the air. "Who are you? And what happened here?" The answers, he suspected, were buried deep within the shadows of this ghost town. Lily, still weak and trembling, leaned heavily on Dusty as they made their way back up the stairs. The sunlight, though dim, felt like a warm embrace after the darkness of the cellar. He led her out of the bank and into the fresh air, carefully guiding her to a nearby bench in front of the old saloon. She coughed, her lungs struggling to adjust to the clean air. Dusty quickly retrieved his canteen from Bess and offered it to her. She drank greedily, the water trickling down her chin. As she drank, Dusty noticed something glinting beneath her tattered clothes. It was a locket hanging from a delicate silver chain. He didn't want to intrude, but something about the locket drew his attention. It was heart-shaped, with intricate carvings on its surface. He couldn't quite make out the details from where he stood, but it seemed strangely familiar. Once Lily had finished drinking, Dusty took off his coat and gently placed it around her shoulders. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered again. "You're very kind." He simply nodded, offering her a small, reassuring smile. He sat down beside her on the bench, maintaining a respectful distance. He knew she needed time to recover, to process what had happened. But he also knew that he needed answers. He pointed to the locket, then raised his eyebrows in a silent question. "May I see it?" Lily hesitated for a moment, then reached up and gently lifted the locket from beneath her clothes. She held it out to him, her fingers trembling slightly. As Dusty took the locket in his hand, a wave of dizziness washed over him. The carvings on the surface were now clear, and he recognized them instantly. It was a delicate rose, entwined with a banner that read, "Forever yours." He had seen this locket before. He had given this locket to someone a long time ago. A memory, buried deep within his heart, began to surface. A memory of love, of laughter, and of a promise that was never fulfilled. A promise that was stolen by violence and despair. Could it be? Could this be the same locket? Could this girl be her? The silence around him seemed to deepen, the world fading away as the truth began to dawn. The world swam back into focus, but everything looked different now. The ghost town wasn't just a collection of abandoned buildings anymore. It was a stage, a backdrop for a tragedy that had unfolded years ago. Dusty stared at the locket in his hand, his heart pounding in his chest. He closed his eyes, and the memories came flooding back. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The sun shone brightly on that day, a day filled with joy and anticipation. Young Dusty, a different man then, talkative, full of life, with a smile that could melt glaciers, stood nervously at the altar of a small country church. He wore a brand-new suit, a little too tight around the shoulders, and his boots were shined to a mirror gloss. He fidgeted, adjusting his tie, his eyes constantly scanning the entrance. He was waiting for Lily. His Lily, the woman he loved more than life itself. The church bells chimed, and a hush fell over the crowd. Then she appeared. Lily, radiant in a white dress, her long brown hair flowing down her back, her eyes sparkling with happiness. She walked towards him, her father by her side, her smile as bright as the sun. Dusty's heart swelled with love. He couldn't believe that this beautiful woman was about to become his wife. He reached out and took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. He felt a surge of warmth, a sense of belonging that he had never experienced before. The ceremony began, the words of the preacher washing over him. He barely heard them, his eyes fixed on Lily's face. He couldn't wait to say, "I do," to seal their love forever. But then chaos erupted. A group of masked bandits burst into the church, guns blazing. The wedding guests screamed and scattered, diving for cover. The bandits, led by a ruthless man with a scarred face, were after the town's gold, which was being stored in the church's safe. In the ensuing mayhem, Lily was grabbed by one of the bandits. Dusty fought back fiercely, but he was outnumbered and overpowered. He watched in horror as Lily was dragged away, kicking and screaming, her locket, the locket he had given her just that morning, glinting in the sunlight. He was struck down, left for dead as the bandits rode off with Lily and the gold, leaving behind a scene of devastation and despair. His voice died with her kidnapping. He had failed to save her. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Dusty awoke some time later, lying amidst the wreckage of the church. The wedding guests were gone, and the only sound was the mournful creaking of the wind through the broken windows. He tried to speak, to call out Lily's name, but no sound came out. The trauma of the attack, the shock of losing her, had stolen his voice. He staggered to his feet, his body aching, his heart broken. He searched for Lily, desperately clinging to the hope that she might still be alive. But she was gone, vanished without a trace. The townspeople, shaken by the attack, offered him their condolences, but their words were empty. They couldn't understand the depth of his pain, the magnitude of his loss. They urged him to move on, to forget about Lily, to rebuild his life. But Dusty couldn't forget. He couldn't move on. Lily was a part of him, woven into the very fabric of his being. Without her, he was nothing but an empty shell, a ghost haunting the plains. He spent months searching for her, following every lead, tracking down every rumor. He rode through treacherous terrain, braving harsh weather and dangerous encounters. He faced bandits, outlaws, and hostile Indians, all in the desperate hope of finding Lily. But his search was fruitless. He found no trace of her, no sign that she was still alive. Slowly, his hope began to dwindle, replaced by a gnawing despair. He realized that he might never see her again. He became a changed man. The cheerful, talkative Dusty was gone, replaced by a silent, brooding loner. He wandered the West, aimlessly drifting from town to town, seeking solace in the vast emptiness of the landscape. He kept the locket, Lily's locket, close to his heart, a constant reminder of his lost love. It was the only thing he had left of her, a tangible link to the past. He never gave up hope completely, but the years of searching had taken their toll. He was a shadow of his former self, a ghost in his own life. Now, years later, holding that same locket in his hand, he knew, somehow, that his search might finally be over. He just had to be brave enough to face the truth. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Back in the present, Dusty carefully opened the locket. Inside, there were two tiny portraits. One was of him, a younger version with a bright smile and hopeful eyes. The other was of Lily, her eyes sparkling with love and laughter. He traced the outline of her face with his fingertip, a wave of sadness washing over him. He looked up at the woman sitting beside him on the bench. Her face was gaunt and worn, her clothes tattered, but he could still see traces of the Lily he had loved so dearly. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her jaw, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, they were all familiar. He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers brushing against her skin. She looked at him, her eyes filled with confusion and a flicker of recognition. He pointed to the portrait in the locket, then pointed to her, a silent question in his eyes. "Is this you?" Lily's brow furrowed. She reached up and touched the locket, her fingers tracing the outline of the rose. A faint memory stirred within her, a fleeting image of a young man with a bright smile, placing the locket around her neck. I don't remember," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "My memories are all jumbled up. It's like looking through a fog." Dusty nodded, understanding. He knew that she had been through a terrible ordeal, that her mind had been fractured by trauma. He wouldn't push her, wouldn't force her to remember. He would be patient, and he would help her piece together the fragments of her past. He closed the locket and handed it back to her. He stood up, then offered her his hand. She hesitated for a moment, then took it. He helped her to her feet, and they stood there for a moment, facing each other, the silence between them filled with unspoken questions and hesitant hope. He knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but he also knew that he couldn't abandon her, not again. He had found her after all these years, and he wouldn't let her go. He would protect her, care for her, and help her to heal. And maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild their love, brick by brick, from the ruins of their past. The first step, he knew, was getting them both away from this ghost town and whatever dark secrets it held. It was time to leave. Dusty led Lily towards Bess, who greeted them with a soft nicker. He helped Lily onto the horse, careful not to jostle her too much. He mounted behind her, his arms encircling her waist, a sense of protectiveness washing over him. He hadn't felt this way in years, this surge of purpose, this fierce determination to keep someone safe. As they rode out of the ghost town, Dusty couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He scanned the surrounding hills, his eyes searching for any sign of danger. The bandits who had kidnapped Lily years ago, could they still be out there? Could they be the ones who had imprisoned her in the cellar? He urged Bess into a faster pace, wanting to put as much distance as possible between them and the town. Lily clung to him tightly, her head resting against his back. He could feel her trembling, and he knew that she was still scared. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice raspy from disuse. "I won't let anything happen to you." Lily didn't respond, but he felt her grip tighten around his waist. He knew that she didn't fully trust him yet, that she needed time to heal and to remember. But he was willing to wait, to earn her trust, to prove to her that he was the man she could rely on. As they rode, Lily began to stir. This feels familiar, she said, her voice stronger now. Riding a horse. The wind in my hair. Dusty smiled, a glimmer of hope flickering in his heart. Maybe, just maybe, her memories were starting to return. He slowed Bess to a gentle trot, allowing her to take in the scenery, to absorb the sights and sounds of the West. They rode in silence for a while, the only sound the rhythmic beat of Bess's hooves and the gentle whisper of the wind. Then Lily spoke again. I remember a song, she said, her voice barely audible. A song my mother used to sing to me. She began to hum, a simple, lilting melody. Dusty recognized the tune instantly. It was a lullaby, a song that Lily's mother used to sing to her when she was a little girl. He remembered Lily telling him about it, years ago, during their courtship. He joined in, humming along with her, his voice rough and hesitant at first, but growing stronger with each note. As they hummed together, a sense of peace settled over them. They were two lost souls, finally finding their way back to each other, guided by the faint echoes of their past. But they weren't out of danger yet. Something told Dusty that the ghost town hadn't given up its secrets, and that the past was about to catch up with them. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the plains. Dusty knew they needed to find shelter for the night. He spotted a small cave nestled in the side of a rocky hill and guided Bess towards it. The cave was small and cramped, but it offered protection from the elements. He helped Lily dismount and led her inside. He gathered some dry wood and started a small fire, the flames casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. The fire provided warmth and light, creating a sense of comfort and security. Dusty offered Lily some dried meat and water. She ate slowly, her appetite gradually returning. As she ate, she watched Dusty, her eyes filled with curiosity and a growing sense of trust. You haven't said a word since you rescued me, she said, her voice soft. Why? Dusty hesitated, unsure how to explain his silence. He pointed to his throat, then shook his head, a gesture of helplessness. Lily studied his face, her gaze searching. You can't speak, she asked. He nodded, his eyes filled with sadness. But why? She persisted. What happened? Dusty looked away, unable to meet her gaze. The memory of the attack, of Lily being dragged away, was too painful to relive. Lily reached out and gently touched his hand. It's okay, she said, her voice filled with compassion. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. I can see it in your eyes. You've been through a lot. Dusty looked up at her, surprised by her understanding. He had expected her to be afraid of him, to distrust him. But instead, she was offering him comfort and acceptance. Your eyes, she said, her voice barely a whisper. They're kind. I feel safe with you. Dusty's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected her to say that, to feel that way about him. He had spent so many years pushing people away, convinced that he was incapable of love and happiness. But now, here was Lily, seeing something good in him, something worth trusting. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. He couldn't speak, but he could show her, through his actions, that he was worthy of her trust. He would protect her, care for her, and help her to heal. And maybe, just maybe, they could find happiness together, even in this harsh and unforgiving land. Suddenly, a twig snapped outside the cave. Dusty's eyes narrowed, his hand instinctively reaching for his revolver. They weren't alone. Someone was out there, watching them. The past had finally caught up with them. Dusty silently motioned for Lily to stay put, grabbing a blanket and gently covering her with it. He crept towards the entrance of the cave, peering out into the darkness. He could see the faint glow of a campfire in the distance, and the silhouettes of several men gathered around it. He recognized their voices, gruff, menacing, and all too familiar. The bandits. They had found them. He silently cursed his bad luck. He had hoped to get Lily to safety before they caught up with them, but it was too late. They were trapped, with no way to escape. He knew that he had to protect Lily, no matter the cost. He couldn't let those men take her again. He would fight them to the death if necessary. He crept back into the cave and knelt beside Lily. He took her hand and squeezed it tightly, his eyes conveying his determination and his love. He pointed to his ears, then to the entrance of the cave, a silent warning. Stay quiet. He grabbed his rifle and checked the ammunition, his movements swift and precise. He had been a marksman since he was a boy, and he knew how to handle a gun. He would need every skill he possessed to survive this night. He took a deep breath and crept back towards the entrance of the cave, his rifle raised, his senses on high alert. He could hear the bandits approaching, their voices growing louder, their footsteps crunching on the dry leaves. She has to be around here somewhere, one of them said, his voice harsh and grating. I saw her with that silent freak. And the gold, another one asked. Did she tell him where it is? She doesn't remember anything, the first one replied. But she will. We'll make her remember. Dusty's blood ran cold. The gold. That's what they were after. He had forgotten about the gold that had been stolen from the church all those years ago. It must have been hidden somewhere in the town, and the bandits believed that Lily knew its location. He knew that he couldn't let them get their hands on Lily again, or on the gold. He had to stop them, once and for all. He steeled himself for the fight, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it, the moment of truth. He was ready. He would make sure Lily would be safe, even if it cost him his life. The bandits were close, very close. The first bandit stepped into view, his face illuminated by the flickering firelight. It was the scarred man, the leader of the gang. He grinned, a cruel and menacing expression that sent a shiver down Dusty's spine. Well, the scarred man said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Look what we have here. The silent freak and the little bird. Come and give us back our gold, have you? Dusty didn't respond. He simply raised his rifle and fired. The shot caught the scar man by surprise, hitting him in the shoulder. He staggered back, clutching his wound, his grin replaced by a look of rage. Get him, he roared, and the other bandits charged forward, firing their guns. Dusty ducked back into the cave, grabbing Lily and pulling her deeper inside. Bullets whizzed past them, ricocheting off the cave walls. He had to find a way to protect her, to keep her out of harm's way. He pushed her towards the back of the cave, where there was a narrow crevice in the rock. Hide here, he whispered, and don't come out no matter what happens. Lily hesitated, her eyes filled with fear. But what about you? She asked. Dusty smiled reassuringly. I'll be fine, he said. Just trust me. He turned and faced the entrance of the cave, his rifle raised, his eyes narrowed. The bandits were closing in, their faces contorted with anger and greed. He fired again, and another bandit fell, clutching his chest. The remaining bandits scattered, taking cover behind rocks and trees. Dusty knew that he couldn't hold them off forever. He was outnumbered and outgunned. But he wouldn't give up. He would fight to the last breath to protect Lily. He used his knowledge of the terrain to his advantage, moving quickly and silently, taking out the bandits one by one. He was a skilled marksman, and he didn't miss. He was also a resourceful cowboy, using every trick he knew to outsmart his enemies. He set traps, created diversions, and used the shadows to his advantage. He was a one-man army, defending the woman he loved against overwhelming odds. The fight was fierce and brutal, but Dusty refused to surrender. He would not let the bandits win. He would not let them take Lily again. He would fight until he could fight no more. His silence amplified his rage, his determination. He was fighting for his lost love. He was fighting for his second chance. He was fighting for Lily. Dusty dodged a bullet, rolling behind a large rock. He was running out of ammunition, and the bandits were closing in. He knew he couldn't hold them off for much longer. Suddenly, he heard a scream. He looked towards the back of the cave and saw that one of the bandits had found Lily. He was dragging her out of the crevice, his hand clamped over her mouth. Let her go, Dusty roared, but the sound came out as a strangled whisper. His voice was still lost, trapped deep inside him. The scarred man laughed, a cruel and triumphant sound. Looks like the silent freak finally found his voice, he said. Too bad it's too late. He raised his gun, aiming it at Dusty's head. Just then, Lily broke free from the bandit's grasp. She ran towards Dusty, throwing herself in front of him, shielding him from the bullet. "No," she screamed. "Dusty." The sound of her voice, calling his name, was like a jolt of electricity surging through his body. It was as if a dam had broken, releasing a flood of memories, emotions, and long-suppressed feelings. He looked at Lily, her face contorted with fear and determination, and he saw her. Not just the woman he had rescued from the cellar, but the Lily he had loved and lost, the woman he had spent years searching for. In that moment, everything came rushing back to her. The wedding, the bandits, the kidnapping, the years of captivity, the pain, the suffering, the hope, the love. She remembered everything. "Dusty," she said again, her voice clear and strong. "It's me, Lily. I remember." The sound of her voice, the sight of her face, triggered something deep inside Dusty. A surge of emotion, of love, of rage, of grief, washed over him. He felt a burning sensation in his throat, a pressure building inside him, struggling to be released. And then it happened. A sound escaped his lips. A word. "Lily," he said, his voice hoarse and shaky, but clear and audible. He had found his voice, and with it, he had found his purpose. He would not let the bandits hurt her again. He would protect her, no matter the cost. He would fight for her, for their love, for their future. He would fight. For Lily. And this time he would win. The sound of his own voice, after so many years of silence, was strange and unfamiliar, but it filled him with a newfound strength. He raised his rifle, his eyes blazing with determination. The scarred man, momentarily stunned by Dusty's sudden burst of speech, hesitated. It was a fatal mistake. Dusty fired, and the bullet struck the scarred man square in the chest. He gasped, his eyes widening in disbelief, and then he crumpled to the ground, dead. The remaining bandits, seeing their leader fall, lost their nerve. They turned and fled, disappearing into the darkness. Dusty watched them go, his heart pounding in his chest. He had won. He had defeated the bandits, rescuing Lily once again. He lowered his rifle and turned to face Lily, his eyes filled with love and relief. She ran towards him, throwing her arms around him, her body trembling with emotion. "Dusty," she said, her voice choked with tears. "You saved me. Again." He held her tightly, burying his face in her hair, his heart overflowing with gratitude. He had lost her once, but he wouldn't lose her again. "I'll always protect you, Lily," he said, his voice rough but clear. "I promise." They stood there for a long moment, embracing each other, their love a beacon of hope in the darkness. The fight was over, but the healing was just beginning. They had a long road ahead of them, but they would face it together, hand in hand. As the sun began to rise, casting a golden glow across the plains, Dusty and Lily emerged from the cave. They gathered their belongings, packed Bess, and prepared to leave the ghost town behind. Before they left, Dusty paused and looked back at the cave, a silent promise in his eyes. He would never forget what had happened there, the darkness he had faced, and the love he had rediscovered. He turned to Lily, took her hand, and smiled. "Let's go," he said. "Let's find our future." And with that, they mounted Bess and rode off into the sunrise, leaving the ghost town behind, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, their love a guiding light in the vast and unforgiving West. Their love would guide them. They were together. They were going to be okay. The sun climbed higher in the sky, painting the vast plains in hues of gold and amber. Dusty and Lily rode in comfortable silence, their bodies swaying in unison with Bess's gentle gait. The ghost town was far behind them now, a distant memory fading into the horizon. Lily leaned against Dusty, her head resting on his shoulder. She felt safe and secure in his arms, a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The memories of her captivity were still raw and painful, but she knew that she was no longer alone. She had Dusty, and he would help her to heal. Dusty looked down at her, his heart filled with love and gratitude. He had found her again, after all these years of searching. He had given up hope of ever seeing her again, but fate had brought them back together. He wouldn't waste this second chance. He would cherish her, protect her, and love her for the rest of his days. As they rode, they talked, sharing their stories, their hopes, and their dreams. Dusty told Lily about his years of wandering, his struggle to cope with the loss of his voice, and his unwavering determination to find her. Lily told Dusty about her captivity, the hardships she had endured, and the strength she had found within herself to survive. They discovered that they had both changed, grown, and learned valuable lessons from their experiences. They were no longer the same people they had been before the attack, but their love for each other was as strong as ever. They made plans for their future, dreams of building a new life together, a life filled with love, laughter, and happiness. They would find a small town where they could settle down, start a family, and live in peace. They would rebuild their love, brick by brick, from the ashes of their past. They knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but they were confident that they could overcome any obstacle as long as they had each other. Their love was a powerful force, a bond that could not be broken. As they rode towards the horizon, their hearts filled with hope and anticipation, they knew that they were finally home. They had found each other again, and that was all that mattered. They would face the future together, hand in hand, ready to rebuild their lives and their love. The sun was warm on their faces. The wind whispered through the grass. They were free. They were together. They were home. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant shades of orange, pink, and purple. Dusty and Lily rode on, their silhouettes outlined against the fiery canvas. The vastness of the West stretched out before them, an endless expanse of possibility and promise. They didn't know what the future held, what challenges they would face, or what adventures awaited them. But they knew that they would face it all together, their love a constant source of strength and inspiration. They had been through so much, endured so much pain and suffering. They had lost each other, lost their voices, lost their hope. But they had found each other again, and in doing so, they had found themselves. They were no longer haunted by the ghosts of their past. They were free to create their own future, to write their own story. They would fill their lives with love, laughter, and happiness. They would build a home, a family, and a legacy. As they rode towards the setting sun, their hearts filled with hope and gratitude. They knew that they were embarking on a new beginning. The past was behind them. The future lay ahead. They were ready. Dusty reached out and took Lily's hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. He squeezed it gently, a silent promise of love and devotion. She looked at him, her eyes sparkling with happiness, and smiled. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains. Dusty and Lily rode on, their figures growing smaller and smaller, until they disappeared into the twilight. But their story would live on, a testament to the power of love, the resilience of the human spirit, and the promise of a new beginning. It was the story of a silent cowboy who found his voice, and a lost bride who found her way home. It was the story of Dusty and Lily, reunited after years of separation, ready to face the future together, their love a guiding light in the vast and unforgiving West. The West was waiting. Their new life was waiting. Their future was waiting. And as they rode off into the sunset, they knew, deep in their hearts, that everything was going to be okay. They were together, and that was all that mattered. The end.